The next chapter in the manga is properly titled The Feast, and it wastes no time showing why. The apostles attack, and I guess it's not fair to even call it an attack, as the Band of the Hawk is so unbelievably outmatched. These creatures are gigantic, powerful, can regenerate, and are hungry. They pick up the mercenary soldiers like nothing, bite off their limbs, start feasting on their flesh, drinking their blood. Casca looks up in astonishment, wondering, why are we here? And that reason has everything to do with Griffith. As I talked about in the last segment, the moral dilemma here is, all these men were willing to die for Griffith in their many battles. So what's the difference if they die here? Lack of consent would be the biggest factor, but also that dying in a battlefield where you have a chance of victory is a lot different than just getting massacred by a bunch of giant monsters. And with every man dying as a man that looked up to Griffith as a hero, a leader, and a savior. Griffith has always had a messiah-like quality to him, and ironic that to be turned into a near literal messiah means sacrificing his followers. Back up on the literal God Hand, where the God Hand members explain what the brand of sacrifice is to Guts. What we as the reader have always known, and have been waiting for Guts to have on the back of his neck since beginning the manga, where we first saw it in the very first arc and he explained it to Puck, that he is now marked for sacrifice, which means no matter where he goes, no matter what he does, demons will constantly be after him. Guts tries to ignore what the God Hand members are saying and desperately tries to free Griffith from the closed fist. This part is really sad to me because Guts truly thinks that he can save Griffith here, and that they're still in this together in some way. The God Hand members even try to tell Guts that this is what Griffith chose and wanted, but Guts refuses to listen to them. To Guts, he is just trying to rescue his friend and escape, but there is no escape. Even if they ran away, the Hawk members are currently in a completely different dimension. They are trapped without any hope of fleeing. Because back where they were before being transported to this dimension is now a gigantic tornado of sorts. My guess is this tornado keeps the gateway to this dimension hidden and closed off from the real world. The one witnessing this tornado, though, is Rickert. He has finally made his way back to the rendezvous point, the only survivor of his half of the Band of the Hawk. Rickert approaches just seeing a tornado and looks deep inside of it to see something else that's astonishing. Inside the eye of the whirlwind, he sees the Skull Knight is battling with Zod. Rickert recognizes them both, seeing Zod at the end of the first encounter with Guts and Griffith, and being saved by the Skull Knight not too long ago. The dialogue between these two fighters is very interesting. Zod mentions the Skull Knight being their enemy for a millennium, proving that, if you don't think so already, the Skull Knight is not human, and most likely an apostle himself, or as I theorize, a former God Hand member. But also the Skull Knight asked if Void ordered Zod to guard the gate to the other dimension. But Zod scoffs at this, saying that he has no interest in the feast, and that he only hunts for the strong. So Zod once again seems to be on his own mission, while at the same time accepts and allows the God Hand to do what they must. My question is, if Void actually did order Zod to do something, would he obey? I have no idea, but the two begin to fight once again. But we don't get to see any of it. What the hell, right? Let's see fucking Skull Knight and Zod fight each other, but no. We are taken back to the other dimension to watch more of the slaughter. Casca is about to be attacked, but Pippin jumps in, blocking a strike from an apostle. He tells her to run, and before she can reply, Judo picks her up on horseback and begins to run her away from the apostle. A couple of great things here. One is just Pippin's raw strength holding back multiple apostles before there's just too many of them. Pippin has always been the strong, silent one, and whenever he shouts or his eyes open, you know shit is gonna get real. I love that he jumps in to protect his leader, Casca, and I love that we get a display of his power. Unfortunately, though, it is not enough, and we only see it from a distance, but we know that Pippin will not survive this onslaught, as he is overtaken by a swarm of apostles. Rest in peace, big man. You were one of my favorites. Then we cut to Korkis with a group of Hawk members. They are all picked up and eaten in front of his eyes. He does what most rational people would do and just tries to run. The apostle scratches right through the back of his armor, and he falls down a hill. Imagine something so sharp and powerful it scratches through armor. That's gotta hurt. Korkis stands up and walks forward in a daze, believing all this must have just been a dream. Obvious phrasing that it is in fact Griffith's dream. But also it really makes me feel for Korkis. He was always the asshole of the group, but he was still with them every step of the way. He had his gripes towards Guts, but respected everyone else and only wanted to live comfortably. He was never one to enjoy the struggle, but just wanted the struggle to finally be over. And though that may not fit well for a fictional character that you read and watch, it's certainly relatable just as an average human being. And that's what Korkis was. He wasn't the hero, or the badass, or the funny one. He was the real one. And as he states, if you were to hear too, you would just want to wake up and have all of this be over. He then sees a beautiful naked woman in front of him. He goes to her. He states that all this must be a dream anyway, so he may as well. I believe, though, he knew exactly what he was doing. He knew he was going to die, and may as well die with his face buried in some tits. I completely understand. Also, if you watched all my Berserk videos, I said in the very first one that the opening page of the entire manga seems odd, knowing Guts' character as well as we do now. But as you see, the apostle that kills Korkis here is the same apostle Guts kills in the first 3 pages of the first arc. So Miura sort of retconned it in a way that Guts sleeping with the demon in the first opening chapters makes sense as he was getting revenge for Korkis. Judo and Casca run on horseback, Casca wanting him to turn around so that they can fight, but Judo determined to get her to safety somehow. An apostle from beneath them chomps down on their horse and they're thrown off. Then a creepy-looking creature with tentacles coming out of its head stabs Judo with one of them, and Judo puts his entire body in front of Casca and takes a beating from this thing until he is stabbed again from behind. He uses his last little knife that he was always so good at throwing and gets the creature in the eye. Casca then takes this distraction opportunity and slices the apostle in half with her sword. I like when she goes back to Judo and he asks if he killed it. She just says yes, giving him that small bit of satisfaction. She puts him over her shoulder, and Judo's inner thoughts state that he wants to tell her that important thing, but he can't get the words out. All he manages to say is, "You sure do cry a lot," and then falls as the life falls out of him and his body collapses. This is so particularly sad because it's just the idea that we can never say what we want or mean when we want to. He has something to tell her, most likely that he's always loved her, but something completely different comes out instead. And those are his last words. Judo will never get to say what he wanted. And it hurts because Judo, more than anyone, paid so much attention to Casca, always having her back, always noticing when the stress was getting too much for her. He shipped her in Guts when he saw something brewing. He was nothing but supportive, and to his last breath he was by her side, praising her as his leader and wanting her to live on. Casca is then surrounded by apostles. She takes her sword out to swing at one that just catches the sword in its mouth and then breaks it. The demons surround her, whispering to eat her now or before that. And I think we all understand what this implies. Back to Guts, he's fighting apostles with a broken dagger, so what does he do? Well, he just breaks off an apostle's horn and uses it to stab with. Why not? Guts puts up a decent fight against a handful of them, but is still getting knocked around something fierce. Rage clearly adds to his stamina, but it's not enough. And then inside whatever cocoon Griffith is in, he states that he feels like he's sinking. He also begins to see all the deaths of the Hawk members. He feels them going through him, perhaps becoming the very life force causing his transformation. Or at least that's how I understand the events taking place. In some kind of black abyss where Griffith is floating, he sees a crystallization of his last tear shed, I believe symbolizing the end of his humanity. He also sees other tear-like particles floating in the space-like abyss. He calls them baylets, but something corrects him. That they are droplets of ideas that have spilled from this sea into eternity. On the next page is a very close-up image of something unknown. Griffith asks, God? Now trust me, I will get into this, but not right now. There was an omitted chapter following this one, and I plan to cover it, but it was omitted for a reason, and so for now I will just continue the story as it was intended to be read. So Guts fights desperately, still using the broken horn, until he is finally knocked off the top of the God Hand. He slides down and falls into a pool of blood, something that wasn't there before, but has now been collected as a result of the entire band of the Hawk dying. Really fucked up if you think about it, that Guts is just covered with the blood of his friends. He screams out, as anyone would do in this traumatizing situation, and he calls out the names of his friends, but freezing on the name of Casca's. probably not wanting to know the truth of her fate. From out of the shadows walks Gaston, brutally beaten and missing an arm. Gaston, as we know, always looked up to Guts. He falls in Guts' arms, saying he doesn't know if anyone is still alive. He, like Korkis, says it all felt like a dream, that what happened to the Band of the Hawk was too good to be true anyways, and that Griffith always felt like some kind of legend. It's as if all the Hawk members are real and have been thrown into the story of Berserk, realizing it must just be a story. It's a meta moment, for sure, but it doesn't quite break the fourth wall. But then Gaston starts freaking out, and his head explodes, as there was a small demon inside of him. Guts watches his friend's head explode in his arms, grabs Gaston's sword, and tries to kill the demon, but misses. He then looks up to see Pippin standing on the hill, but it is just the hollowed-out corpse of a man that was Pippin. Pippin has been killed, and ultimately, who did it? It's the Count, the one Guts fought and defeated in the Black Swordsman arc. Once again, like with Korkis' death, this gives more meaning behind the first arc of the series, as if Guts was avenging each and every member of the Band of the Hawk, consciously or not. Guts then finds himself surrounded by apostles, all chomping on and eating what's left of the Hawk members. As he's about to fly into a rage, he sees the most horrific one of all, Casca, still alive, yet naked and covered with cuts and bruises. And yes, bleeding from her vagina as well. She's unconscious and being held up by some creature with tentacles. Now Guts' rage is unhinged. He slices through multiple apostles trying to get to her. He makes it as far as he can before one creature bites down on his left arm, trapping him in place. But then, all the demons stop what they're doing. There is a rumbling all around them. Then they look to the God Hand. It is time for Griffith's rebirth. And this is where we're going to end here, guys. Thanks a lot for watching this video. Give it a thumbs up. In the next part, I'm going to be addressing a very dark topic, but I have a lot to say about it, and I really look forward to releasing that video, and I hope you guys watch it, because I have a lot to say about what's going to happen next. And if you know the story, well, it's not a fun topic to talk about. See you next time.